Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I came home on a Thursday night to find our dog sitting by the door and every light in the apartment turned off, like the place was holding its breath. My wife, Jenna, had left that morning for what she called a week-long reset, some kind of space she needed to figure out who she was, but she'd promised she'd be back by evening to talk. Instead, I walked into silence thick enough to feel on my skin. Her suitcase was gone. Her favorite jacket was gone. Even her toothbrush was gone. But the thing that stopped me cold wasn't any of that. It was the gym bag I didn't recognize, shoved behind the couch, half unzipped. Inside were men's supplements, a shaker bottle, and a signed photo from her trainer, Marcus. He'd written a message on the corner. "For your next session. Proud of you. Stay focused." My stomach dropped in a way I'd never felt. Not even in the welding bay when a wrong spark gets too close. This was different. This was a hit straight to whatever part of you still believes someone wouldn't do the thing you fear most. My name is Ryan Burke, 38 years old, welder at the Riverside Shipyard. 15 years in the yard, burn scars across both forearms, steady hands, quiet nature, predictable routines. I'd been the definition of stable, the guy who didn't take sick days, who brought home sandwiches from Subway on long shifts because it was easy and cheap and kept me going. Jenna used to say she loved that about me, the quiet reliability. But somewhere between her working the front desk at Eden Beauty Lounge and scrolling late night through fitness videos on her phone, something changed. Not loud, not sudden, slow like rust, the kind you don't notice until it's already eaten through the beam. I didn't call her, didn't text. I just walked through the apartment, turning on lights, taking in the small absences. Her makeup drawer half empty. Her hair dryer gone. The Target candle she kept on the coffee table burned down to the glass, wick curled like a dead thing. I sat on the edge of the couch and opened her gym app. Marcus had posted a story 2 hours earlier, filmed inside the club, him spotting someone off camera, laughing, talking about trust and showing up when it counts. I watched it once, then again, then shut the phone off. I didn't yell. I didn't hit anything. Welders know the danger of sudden movements. We survive by staying steady. So I opened my notebook, the same one I kept for job orders, and wrote 3 lines: freeze, track, respond. That was my entire reaction to what I already knew had happened. Not suspected, known. Because when a woman leaves for a week to clear her head, but takes every personal item except the ones she needs at home, she's not clearing anything. She's transitioning. And when her trainer sends her signed photos with messages that sound like secrets, he isn't her coach. He's her escape plan. I didn't pour a drink or turn on Netflix to drown it out. Instead, I checked our lease, our shared accounts, the vet paperwork for our dog. I looked at every joint thread in our life like a man planning a controlled demolition. No noise, no panic, just assessment. By midnight, I'd made a quiet decision I didn't even feel hit me until I stood up from the couch. If she wanted a week away from our life, she'd get it. All of it. Because when Jenna came back, the home she walked out of wouldn't exist anymore. I woke up before sunrise the next morning, not because I'd slept well, but because my body was trained for early shifts at the shipyard. The apartment felt different in daylight, like the truth had settled into the corners overnight. I made coffee, fed our dog, Scout, and stood in the kitchen staring at the space where Jenna usually kept her lunch bag. It was gone. She hadn't packed for a week. She'd packed for a life she didn't plan to share with me anymore. I didn't rush. Quiet men don't. We move with purpose, not emotion. I grabbed the notebook again and reviewed what I'd written. Freeze. Track. Respond. The first 2 steps were already happening. Now came the part that would actually change something. I started with documents. Marriage license. Birth certificates. Our lease. Insurance. They'd all been shoved in a drawer under old manuals and random cables. I sorted through them one by one, placing what mattered into a single folder. The kind welders use for inspection reports. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud. Just order-replacing chaos. I found her signature on forms she'd filled out last year, the same looping script I'd seen on her gym waiver. It hit me, briefly, how much you can miss when you trust someone enough not to look too closely. By mid-morning, I loaded the folder into my pickup, the Dodge Ram I'd saved up for through 3 straight winters of overtime. After that first mention of the make, I stopped thinking of it as anything but the truck. It was my one constant, my one piece of ground that hadn't shifted under me. I drove across town toward the storage unit I'd rented months ago for tools I didn't have space for. It wasn't much, but it was clean, paid for, and mine. I placed the documents inside, locked the door, and slid the key onto my ring. Next was the bank. The teller recognized me from my weekly Friday deposits. She asked where Jenna was, said she hadn't seen her in a while. He said she was visiting family, and the teller nodded like that made sense. I closed the joint account and opened a new one with a separate mailing address. Every dollar of my welding checks going forward would land where only I could reach it. No announcements, no accusations, just a clean redirect. On the way home, I stopped at Lowe's for moving boxes. The cashier made small talk about weekend projects. He said he was reorganizing the garage. I said I had some sorting of my own to do. Back at the apartment, I placed the boxes against the wall, untouched for now. Scout followed me from room to room, tail low, sensing the change. That afternoon, Jenna texted me from her reset trip. She said she hoped I was okay and that she'd be back Sunday to talk about next steps. He read it twice, then put the phone face down on the counter. There was nothing to say. Sunday would come, but the version of me she expected wouldn't be here. I sat on the couch, the weight of the day settling, and understood fully what I was doing. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was removing myself from her orbit so quietly that she wouldn't notice the distance until she reached for me and found air. She wanted a week to figure herself out. She'd get it, just not in the way she imagined. By Saturday morning, the apartment felt less like a home and more like a staging area. I woke before the alarm, made coffee, and sat at the table listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Scout rested at my feet, head on his paws, waiting for whatever came next. I scratched behind his ear and told him he was coming with me, though I didn't raise my voice above a whisper. He didn't need volume to understand. Dogs feel intent better than people do. I spent the early hours reviewing the lease. My name was the only one listed, something Jenna had insisted on when we moved in 2 years ago, because she said it made her feel less pressured. I saw it differently now, but there was no point analyzing the past. What mattered was the leverage the present gave me. I called the leasing office, asked about early termination, and the manager said it wasn't a problem as long as the unit was cleaned and vacated. He said they'd had multiple breakups over the years, and this was routine. He didn't ask questions. I didn't offer details. After that call, the path forward settled into clarity. I pulled the boxes from the wall and began packing with the same methodical pace I used on the welding line. My clothes first, then tools, then personal items Jenna never cared about enough to ask the story behind. I left her things untouched, not as an act of kindness, but because they weren't part of the life I was taking with me. They were artifacts of a version of her I no longer recognized. Around noon, I drove the first load to the storage unit. Scout rode in the truck's passenger seat, occasionally pressing his nose against the window, fogging the glass. We stopped for a moment outside a small shopping plaza where Jenna and I used to grab lunch after her shifts. A couple walked out of a Subway, laughing, arms around each other, the kind of casual closeness you can't fake. I watched them until they got into their car and drove off. Then I put the truck back in gear. By late afternoon, I'd cleared half the apartment. Not enough to make it obvious at first glance, but enough that the foundation of our shared life was now portable. My phone buzzed twice with messages from Jenna. She said she missed Scout. She said she hoped I was taking this time to reflect. She said she couldn't wait to talk things through on Sunday. He read each message without replying, letting the words sit like dust on a surface I no longer planned to clean. That evening, I sat on the couch with Scout while the sun dropped behind the buildings. I didn't turn on Netflix, didn't distract myself. Instead, I reviewed the quiet changes already in motion. A new bank account, a secured storage unit, a lease ready to close. By the time Jenna returned, I wouldn't be gone. I'd simply be unreachable. There's a difference. One wounds. The other teaches. Sunday came in slow, gray, and colder than the forecast promised. I woke before the sun again, not because I was restless, but because the final stage of my plan needed a clear head. Scout paced near the door, sensing movement in the air. I made coffee, sat at the quiet kitchen table, and looked around the apartment like a man studying a blueprint before the last weld. Half the shelves were empty. My boots weren't by the door. My jacket wasn't on the hook. The place still looked lived in, but only if you didn't look too long. Jenna said she'd be home by 3. That gave me hours. Enough to finish the transition without rushing. Welders know the danger of rushing. That's how seams break, how steel fails. I started with the utilities. Our internet account had both names on it, but they'd listed my email as primary. One call, a short hold, and the service was scheduled to end Tuesday. They said they were sorry to lose us. I said nothing. Our streaming subscriptions were all tied to my card, including the Netflix plan Jenna swore she'd cancel last year, but never did. I opened the account on my phone and paused for a moment, staring at the profile icons we'd set up back when we thought we understood each other. Then I hit cancel, not out of spite, out of necessity. After that, I wrote a short note for the leasing office, confirming the termination date. I placed it on the counter where Jenna couldn't miss it if she walked in before I returned. The rest of the morning was quiet work. Boxes sealed, tools wrapped, clothes neatly folded instead of shoved into bags. Scout watched in silence, tail flicking lightly whenever I passed. Around noon, I loaded the final set of boxes into the truck. Before closing the tailgate, I walked back inside one last time. The apartment felt hollow in a way that didn't hurt anymore. It felt accurate, a space stripped down to its truth. I collected Scout's leash, clipped it on, and we left without ceremony. I drove across town toward the temporary place I'd rented, a small guest house behind an older couple's home I'd found through a coworker. Clean, private, no history attached. The kind of place a man could build something from without feeling ghosts in the walls. I unloaded the boxes, set Scout's bed near the window, and let him explore while I stood in the doorway taking in the stillness. At 2:30, Jenna texted that she was on her way. She added a heart at the end like punctuation she hadn't earned in years. He read the message once, then powered the phone off. Not silent mode. Off. By the time she pulled into the apartment parking lot at 3, expecting a conversation, expecting the version of me she'd grown comfortable walking over, she would open the door to a truth she'd never planned for. You can't lose a man who's already gone. Jenna showed up at the apartment at exactly 3, just like she'd promised in every message I'd ignored. I wasn't there to see her face when she opened the door, but I could imagine it clearly enough. Confusion first, then the slow rise of panic when she noticed the empty closet, the missing tools, the blank spaces where my things used to anchor the room. She would call my name even though she knew I wouldn't answer. She'd check the bedroom, the kitchen, the balcony. People always check the balcony, as if the person they left behind might still be standing there, waiting to be convinced not to leave. I didn't need to witness any of it. Silence is cleaner when you don't watch it land. While she stood in the half-empty apartment, I was across town, sitting on the small porch of the guest house with Scout stretched at my feet. The place smelled like pine cleaner and fresh paint. No memories. No echoes. Just space. I sipped coffee from a paper cup I'd grabbed earlier on my way through a Target parking lot. The kind of aimless detour you make when you're buying time on purpose. Cars moved in and out. Families walked past with bags, and I felt something close to weightlessness. Not relief exactly, but the first breath after coming up from deep water. My phone stayed powered off until nearly 4, when I turned it on long enough to organize the final pieces. Jenna had left 12 missed calls and 8 messages, each one shorter than the last. She said she was confused. She said she didn't understand. She said she thought the week apart was supposed to help us rebuild. Then she said she deserved a conversation. That word, deserved, was doing more work than she realized. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded our dog's vet records to my new address and updated the emergency contact. Then I emailed the leasing office confirming the keys would be dropped off tomorrow morning. No explanation attached. Explanations are a form of negotiation, and I was done negotiating with someone who had spent months redefining herself in the mirror of another man's attention. Around 5, I received a final message. He read it without satisfaction, without anger. She said she was coming to find me, that she wouldn't let our marriage end like this. As if endings are something you vote on. As if stepping out of the life you built together to figure yourself out didn't already cast the deciding ballot. I powered the phone off again and set it on the table beside me. Quiet isn't absence. Quiet is direction. Jenna didn't find me that night, though she tried. I knew she would. People who expect stability don't handle silence well. They look for cracks, familiar paths, predictable habits. But every pattern she thought she understood about me had already been rewritten. That was the point. Quiet isn't retreat. Quiet is redesign. I spent Sunday evening in the guest house, unpacking the essentials. Not everything. Just what I needed to make the space functional. A bed. My welding jackets. A few shirts. Scout's toys. The rest stayed in boxes stacked neatly against the wall, each one labeled in black marker. Order brings calm, even when the world around you doesn't. After dinner, I took Scout for a walk around the block. The neighborhood was older, quieter than the apartment complex we'd lived in. Porch lights glowed softly. Lawnmowers sat cooling in driveways. A couple chatted near their mailbox, the kind of easy conversation Jenna and I used to have before everything drifted sideways. The air was crisp enough to see my breath. Scout kept glancing up at me, as if checking whether this new life was permanent. I patted his head and kept walking. When we got back, I turned my phone on again, only long enough to handle the part she wouldn't expect. I went through every shared account and removed myself. The gym membership she'd begged me to keep, saying it might motivate her, canceled. The photo storage app where she uploaded progress pictures Marcus probably encouraged, separated. My files moved to my own plan. Even the grocery delivery account was switched to my new address. You don't think about these things when life feels normal. You think about all of them when you're putting distance between who you were and who you refuse to be again. A single notification caught my eye. An email receipt from Amazon she'd placed earlier that week, shipping athletic wear to a locker near the gym. She'd told me she needed time to clear her head. Meanwhile, she'd been ordering clothes she didn't bring on her so-called reset trip. That detail didn't make me angry. It made everything make sense. Around 9, Jenna sent another message. This one was longer. She said she was scared. She said she felt like she'd come home to a stranger's life. She said we needed to talk before things went too far. But things had already gone exactly where they needed to. She just didn't know it. I turned the phone off and placed it face down on the dresser. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the quiet settle. Not as a weapon, as a line drawn cleanly, precisely, without shaking hands. People think endings happen during arguments, during yelling, during tears. But real endings happen like this, softly, silently, when one person stops being available to hurt. And by the time Jenna realized that access was gone, it wasn't a threat. It was a fact. Monday at the shipyard felt different, even though nothing there ever really changes. Same steel frames, same welding bays, same rhythm of grinders and sparks flying in predictable arcs. But I walked in with a steadiness I hadn't felt in months. The supervisor nodded at me like he always did, unaware that my entire life had been rearranged over the weekend with the same precision I used when laying a perfect bead. Work has a way of quieting the mind. Steel doesn't lie. People do. I kept my phone off all morning, letting messages pile up where I couldn't hear them. Around noon, during break, I switched it on long enough to scan what Jenna had sent. 7 texts. 3 voicemails. A missed call from a number I didn't recognize, probably the salon. Her messages had shifted tone again, moving from confusion to urgency. She said she'd gone by the leasing office and they told her the unit was being vacated. She said she didn't understand what I was doing. She said we needed to talk like adults. The same phrase she used when she walked out for her reset week, leaving me with the dishes and the silence. I didn't respond. Instead, I deleted every message, powered the phone off, and went back to work. There's clarity in heat and metal that conversations can't give you. After my shift, I stopped by the guest house to let Scout out before heading to the store. The fridge was nearly empty, and I wasn't about to live on takeout. I drove to a Walmart a few blocks over, tossed essentials into the cart, and appreciated the anonymity of aisles filled with people who didn't know me or the story behind my empty ring finger. No one there cared who hurt who. They just wanted groceries and a quiet evening. I fit right in. Back at the guest house, I unpacked the bags, fed Scout, and sat on the porch steps watching the sky dim. For the first time, I felt the distance between what my life had been and what it was becoming. Not a cliff, not a break, just a widening gap created by choices she made long before I responded. Around 7, my coworker Mark texted from his wife's phone, asking if I was okay. He said the guys at the yard were worried. He said Jenna had shown up at the shipyard earlier asking if anyone had seen me. He said she looked shaken. I appreciated the concern, but I didn't reply. Not because I was shutting him out, but because responding would reopen a door I was already on the other side of. Quiet isn't punishment. It's rebalancing. And while she scrambled to understand the silence, I was already building a life where her noise no longer reached. Tomorrow, the next phase would begin. Tuesday started before dawn, same as always, but the air felt sharper, cleaner, like something had finally burned off. I brewed coffee in the tiny guest house kitchen and stood by the window while Scout ate his breakfast. The quiet didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. At 6, I turned my phone on long enough to scan for anything urgent. There were new messages from Jenna, longer ones, spilling over into paragraphs, but I didn't open them. I wasn't looking for explanations or apologies. Explanations don't rebuild trust, and apologies don't undo contact with a trainer who helped her relieve stress in ways no married woman should. Before heading to the shipyard, I stopped by the old apartment to drop off the keys. I waited until I was sure the leasing office was open, walked in, handed the envelope to the manager, and said I was finalizing the move out. He nodded, asked if everything went smoothly. He said she'd already called earlier asking about the status, sounding pretty upset. He didn't look for details. People who work in leasing hear enough stories to know when not to ask. When I stepped back into the parking lot, Jenna's car wasn't there. A part of me expected to see it, expected her to be waiting, expecting confrontation. But absence is its own answer. I got in the truck, pulled out, and didn't look back. Work that morning came easy. Welding does that. It demands full attention, leaving no room for old memories or the echo of someone calling your name from a place you no longer stand. During lunch, I ate quickly, sitting on a concrete step behind the shop. A group of guys nearby were talking about weekend plans. One of them mentioning he had a coupon for Applebee's that he didn't plan on wasting. Their laughter drifted over, light and uncomplicated. It reminded me of a time before I knew what betrayal looked like in yoga leggings and protein shakes. After my shift, I drove back to the guest house with Scout hanging halfway out the window, catching wind like nothing in the world had changed. I envied him a little. The simplicity, the present moment. No past to replay, no future to worry about. When I got home, I finally powered my phone on again. Not to answer Jenna, but to block the number of the gym where Marcus worked. They'd called twice. Probably checking in, or maybe covering themselves. Either way, I wanted no contact with the place where she'd started building a life that didn't include me. Just as I finished, a single text from Jenna came through, a short one this time. She said she needed to see me tonight, that she had something to confess, something she claimed I deserved to know. The mistake she made was assuming I was still interested. Confessions only matter to the person who needs to unload them. The person walking away doesn't need the weight. Jenna showed up at the guest house just after sunset. I knew she would. People always come looking for what they never expected to lose. I saw her through the front window before she reached the steps, arms wrapped around herself, shoulders tight, scanning the yard like she didn't recognize the world she'd walked into. Scout lifted his head, ears perked, but stayed beside me when I didn't move. Dogs follow the temperature of their owner's decisions. She knocked twice, soft, cautious, like a stranger asking permission. He said through the door that now wasn't a good time. I kept my voice steady, low, giving nothing away. She said she needed 5 minutes. She said she wouldn't leave without talking. She said she had something I deserved to hear. Deserved. There was that word again, worn thin from overuse. I opened the door just enough to see her without offering entry. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence. Eyes red, hair tied back like she'd rushed out of the apartment without checking the mirror. She asked if she could come inside. He said he preferred to talk out here. Boundaries matter more when someone has already crossed them. She started with the script I'd expected, the confusion, the regret, the claim that she'd been lost. She said the week away made her realize she'd made a mistake. She said she'd gone to the gym because it felt like the only place she could breathe. Then she said Marcus misread things, that he took advantage of her vulnerability. Her wording shifted, changed shape, tried to find the angle that would land. I didn't interrupt. Welders learn patience because heat does its work whether you rush or not. Then she said the thing she'd been circling, the confession she thought would break me enough to make me stay. She admitted she'd slept with him twice. She said it happened before the reset week. She said she hated herself for it. She waited for a reaction she thought she deserved. When none came, She asked if I cared at all. He said caring and returning aren't the same thing. Silence sat between us like a wall neither of us wanted to climb. That's when she shifted again, reaching for the familiar, saying we could see a counselor, try again, rebuild. She said she deleted his number. She said she quit the gym. She said she couldn't imagine her life without me. Her eyes scanned the porch, noticing the boxes inside. She said she didn't understand why I moved out so fast. He said the only true sentence I'd spoken to her in months. Quiet decisions don't need announcements. Her face tightened, a flash of anger breaking through the fear. She said she deserved a chance to fix what she broke. I let the words settle, then told her I wasn't interested in fixing something she'd walked out of long before I packed a single box. Behind her, a car drove past, headlights sliding over us. A man carrying Starbucks stepped into a neighboring driveway. Normal life continued without hesitation. It always does. Jenna asked if this was really it, if I was choosing to throw everything away. I didn't answer immediately. Some truths need the weight of silence behind them. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. A man can only rebuild the things he still respects. Jenna stood there waiting for me to take it back, to soften, to step into the space she kept open for the version of me she thought would always return. But the man she was hoping for wasn't standing on that porch anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindictive. I was simply done, quietly, completely, in a way words could never reverse. She asked what she was supposed to tell people, what she was supposed to do now. He said that wasn't my decision anymore. Her life had taken its shape long before I moved my things out, long before I stepped out of her orbit. She blinked hard, processing the shift, the realization that her choices had finally met consequences that didn't argue back. When she reached for my arm, I stepped back. Not harsh, not dramatic, just enough to draw a line she could no longer cross. Something in her face cracked then, the last piece of denial giving way. She said she never meant to hurt me. She said she didn't know why she did what she did. But intention doesn't matter when action does the damage. Welders learn early that what you meant to weld doesn't matter if the seam fails. For a moment, neither of us spoke. A car pulled into the driveway next door, its headlights cutting across the porch. A couple carried a Target bag inside, laughing about something small and ordinary. Life moving forward, no matter what storms blew through someone else's door. Jenna finally asked if there was anything she could do to change my mind. He said no, not with anger, not with finality, just with the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you refuse to carry. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket and whispered that she hoped someday I'd forgive her. I didn't promise I would. Forgiveness is a release, and I wasn't ready to give her that comfort. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She walked to her car slowly, stopping once as if hoping I'd call out. I didn't. When her taillights disappeared down the street, the night settled around me like cooled metal, solid, finished, unbending. Inside, Scout curled up near the bed while I sat at the small table, the quiet wrapping itself around the room. I could feel the future opening in front of me. Not dramatic, not triumphant. Just steady, grounded mine. Some men rebuild louder, with noise and fury. I rebuilt the way I weld, measured, disciplined, and silent. And when the final scene cooled, I walked away without raising my voice. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.